Good evening. Good evening. It's hard to say the same thing every night, right? What up? What do you want me to say? Good. How you doing? Romans 4:17. My daughter's screaming in the other room. She doesn't want to go to sleep. Um, Anyways, Romans 4:17. And I'm just going to summarize a little bit. Paul's speaking about um, Abraham and his faith, and he's talking about how God had made this promise to Abraham. And he says in verse 17, he says, "As it is written, I have made you a father of many nations, before him who he believed, which was God, who quickens the dead and calls those things which be not as though they were." Um, and I know there's so much more in this um, passage to talk about, but I just want to focus on this one verse because I'm not getting into the whole by faith thing and the promise to Abraham. I just want to look at this one thing where it says, God, who quickens the dead and calls those things which are not as though they were. And when God is calling things for Abraham that were not as though they were, he says, I have made you a father of many nations. And he said this to him when he didn't have a child. So it's like, it's like telling any of us, before we had children, I've made you, you are a father of many nations. And it's like, well, I don't even have a kid, right? So it's like he calls things that are not as though they were, because for him, it is that way because he knows what the future holds, right? So whatever God says about us is what may not seem to be now, but is destined to be, right? So I just wanted to focus on that because we need to be able to hear that from God. We need to be able to um, believe, like Abraham, not just whatever it is that God is calling us before it is really even what we are, like being called sons and daughters and children of God, or maybe it's something that God's called you out into ministry or whatever. But more than anything, um, just the promise of being sons and daughters and kings and priests. That's what we're seen as by Him, and it definitely doesn't seem like it now, right? Does it? I mean, it doesn't to me. There are times where I can grasp it, um, but the majority of the time I don't feel that way. Um, so, so I just wanted to say that. I just wanted to point that out about God, that He calls things which are not as though they were. And in your own life, in our lives, we need to be able to hear that from Him. Whatever it is that He's speaking, let's not discredit anything. Let's not, because of our circumstances or because of what we see or how impossible it seems. Because, it's like we know with Abraham, when he said, I've made you a father of many nations, it seemed really impossible, because Sarah was barren. I mean, her whole life, and then she had already gone through menopause, and Abraham was 100 years old. So, um, and I guess I'll have to look at exactly what time he said this to him, but I know he promised him seed when he was like 75, and then he fulfilled it later on, about 25 years later. But but anyway, so it's important to know that whatever God is speaking to you, it's probably going to be unrealistic. Well, it's actually probably going to be impossible. So, but don't let that dishearten you. Uh, Receive it. and believe it and take it by faith, because God calls those things which are not as though they are. Amen.